like to welcome up the group that's been working with Earthjustice under Kizzy, Charles-Guzman's direction. Perry.
Okay, hello. Welcome, everybody. My name is Perry, and today I'll be presenting my team's capstone on sustainable procurement analysis and research for Earthjustice. I'd like to start by thanking my team and our faculty advisor, Kizzy, for all of their hard work thus far this semester. Today we'll begin by giving you an overview of our client, Earthjustice, before delving into a little bit of background on the project. And then we'll be getting into our methodology surrounding research and data analysis, getting into our client deliverables, and finally our 3 recommendations and an implementation timeline. Earthjustice is the premier nonprofit public interest law organization operating in the US. They have 15 locations and over 500 employees. And for the last 50 years, Earthjustice has fought in the courts to protect people's health, to preserve nature and wildlife, to advance clean energy, and to combat climate change. Internally, Earthjustice has set out to align their organization's operations with their missions and values. And to do so, in 2022, Earthjustice conducted a baseline greenhouse gas inventory and set emissions reduction targets to reduce emissions over a half in the next decade. And in the first year, they were able to achieve a 14% emissions reduction in comparison to their baseline greenhouse gas analysis. But future emissions reductions will be very difficult without an aligned strategy to reduce emissions from their largest category, purchased goods and services. Their 2022 inventory found that 88% of emissions were Scope 3 emissions coming from Earthjustice's value chain, of which 67% were coming from the purchased goods and services category. Thus, for this project, Earthjustice has asked us to develop a strategy to reduce procurement-related emissions, which currently account for an outsized proportion of total emissions. Within the purchased goods and services category, our team further broke down the data into Earthjustice's 46 predefined spend categories to evaluate hotspots. These 6 categories represent the bulk of both spend and emissions across Earthjustice's entire procurement portfolio. And you'll see that the 2 largest categories are professional and contracted services and advertising, promotions, and media. In the digital age, data servers and AI are driving a large share of procurement-related emissions. So emissions are not coming from physical goods, but rather intangible services. Service-related emissions are particularly difficult to address because the sustainability of services and alternative service providers can be difficult to assess. These categories helped inform our methodological approach to giving tailored and specific recommendations to our client. We approached the project by first doing deeper research into our client to better understand existing emissions reduction strategies and procurement policies. And we then did a broad-reaching literature review to analyze procurement strategies used and recommended by for-profit law firms, nonprofit organizations, city and state governments, and sustainability standards organizations. Simultaneously, our team was analyzing the data provided to us by Earthjustice to deduce key suppliers. We analyzed over 1,500 suppliers and found the 28 most impactful suppliers. From there, we did a second phase of research focused on implementing best practices with Earthjustice's specific suppliers. And finally, we synthesized our findings into 3 key recommendations and 6 sub-initiatives. Our team also developed 4 deliverables, which will help Earthjustice implement sustainable procurement strategies to improve data collection and supplier sustainability. We've developed a supplier code of conduct which clearly outlines the business and sustainability expectations Earthjustice has for the suppliers they engage with. We also developed a supplier scorecard, which Earthjustice can use to score current suppliers, assess potential new suppliers, and also track sustainability improvements year over year. We'll be giving Earthjustice the data analysis that our team has done to identify key suppliers, as well as a detailed standard operating procedure which Earthjustice can use to replicate the methodology in future years. Additionally, we will be giving them supplier-specific research into each of their 28 key suppliers. And finally, we've written a sustainable purchasing policy report in which we outline the procurement recommendations and implementation suggestions we have for the organization going forwards. To effectively implement an improved procurement strategy for Earthjustice, we've categorized our findings into 3 key recommendations. The first is related to emissions accounting, and the second 2 outline supplier engagement strategies. Our first recommendation is to strengthen greenhouse gas accounting methodology and data management. To do this, Initiative 1 recommends that Earthjustice switch from using a spend-based methodology to a supplier-specific methodology for all feasible procurement purchases. This step is critical to seeing emissions reductions within the purchased goods and services category and achieving their long-term emissions reduction goals. If Earthjustice continues to use a spend-based methodology, they will only see emissions reductions within the purchased goods and services category if spending is reduced. By switching to a supplier hybrid approach, Earthjustice will be able to see year-to-year changes in the purchased goods and services category that are reflective of their supplier's actual emissions. To illustrate this, we can look to their supplier Zoom, who supplies video communication services to Earthjustice. In their current inventory, emissions from procuring services from Zoom are calculated using the industry average emissions factor for wireless telecommunications. When compared to Zoom's actual reported emissions per dollar of revenue, we see that Zoom's actual emissions are about 60% lower than what Earthjustice is currently reporting within their inventory. Thus, integrating supplier-specific data into their inventory will increase the accuracy of emissions reporting. Our second recommendation advises Earthjustice to foster stronger supplier relationships. Relationship building is critical to obtaining greenhouse gas emissions data and working with suppliers to set emissions reduction goals. Initiative 2 outlines an engagement strategy which can be used to categorize suppliers based on how easy it will be for Earthjustice to engage with them. From there, Earthjustice can prioritize the easiest engagement pathways and work their way towards the harder ones. We've also developed a supplier code of conduct that can be used as an introduction point for supplier engagement. Initiative 3 details how Earthjustice will use the code of conduct as a jumping off point for communicating their sustainability strategy and submitting initial data requests. While some suppliers may already have emissions data available, many others will need to work with Earthjustice to set up a data collection strategy. Initiative 4 outlines both an internal and external timeline for Earthjustice to work through in gathering greenhouse gas emissions data from suppliers. Our final recommendation urges Earthjustice to implement effective supplier monitoring and evaluation techniques. To do so, Earthjustice can use the supplier scorecard that our team has developed to continuously monitor vendor sustainability and evaluate potential new suppliers before they start engaging with them. Within Initiative 6, we recommend that Earthjustice begin consolidating their vendor list by developing a preferred supplier list. To do so, we provided a comprehensive guide of best practices within each of the spend categories highlighted at the beginning of the presentation. Using this guidance coupled with the supplier scorecard, Earthjustice will have the tools necessary to decide if they want to build a stronger supplier relationship or switch to a different supplier. And we've structured our implementation, or the implementation of our recommendations into short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. Within the report, each initiative has its own timeline, but for today, I'll just highlight a few key attributes. As soon as possible, we recommend that Earthjustice begin filling in gaps in their data collection process that were identified by our team's analysis, while also sending out the code of conduct to supplier contact points and evaluating their 28 key suppliers using the scorecard. Over the next year, Earthjustice should work to engage with their 28 key suppliers and begin gathering greenhouse gas emissions data. Additionally, they plan to hire a procurement manager to assume responsibility for these tasks. Beyond the next year, Earthjustice should switch to a supplier hybrid accounting methodology for all suppliers they were able to gather greenhouse gas emissions data from. They should also begin developing their preferred supplier list and working towards centralizing procurement. By adopting the procurement strategy developed by our capstone team, Earthjustice can make immediate, impactful steps towards reducing Scope 3 emissions from purchased goods and services. These initiatives will further strengthen the organization's commitment to transparency, ethical sourcing, and climate justice, driving a broader movement towards a sustainable and equitable future. Thank you all for your time. I'll now take any questions.
Hi, I liked your presentation and the color scheme throughout it. So I was gonna ask, so is Earthjustice a data management company? And if so, like, in your plan, do you have like, what if they hire more people?
Earthjustice is a nonprofit law organization. So similar to other organizations like the Sierra Club or NRDC, they fight legislative battles over particular environmental related topics. In terms of staffing, we have not really included staffing within our analysis because we were specifically tasked with focusing on procurement. So procurement does not necessarily reflect the number of staff members. An increase in staffing does not necessarily mean that they will have to do more procurement, since in general they're procuring services like advertising, like consulting, things along those lines. So because of that, we did not factor staffing levels into our analyses.
Thank you. In your study and research, did you find that their current suppliers have the data that they need to make these assessments? And then if they don't, and your recommendation is to find suppliers that do, did you estimate the viability of that?
Great question. So based on our analyses, of the 28 key suppliers we have identified, which account for a bulk share of emissions within the purchased goods and services category, about 25% of them do report emissions publicly. And there are more organizations who may be tracking emissions internally, similar to how Earthjustice is, but they may just not be publicly reporting it due to various things about risk that are coming up these days. So the hope is that through this engagement strategy, Earthjustice can submit data requests and see what organizations do have some sort of data. And then for suppliers who don't have any data, Earthjustice can work with them to set up those data gathering strategies so that in the future they can be receiving data. Of course, we don't expect that by next inventory, they're gonna have every single supplier's specific data, but the hope is that they'll continuously increase the percentage of their procurement portfolio that they do have supplier-specific data for. So at this point, I think, 20%, approximately like 5 to 7 of their key suppliers do publicly report data. So that is a pretty easy plug and play that they can do at this point.
Hi there. I'm just curious to know, did you come across in your research any other methodologies to evaluate purchased goods and services making an impact on the suppliers, alternative to this?
Sorry, can you clarify what you mean by making an impact on suppliers?
So, were there other alternatives rather than, let's say, evaluating your suppliers in what might be a manual process.
Right.
Are there technologies out there that could do this in a faster way? Why did you choose this one?
Certainly. Yeah, there are definitely other ways of engaging with suppliers that require more time, resources, that Earthjustice simply does not have. And given that the vast majority of their emissions are coming from, again, like service-related things, so not purchasing paper, not buying office furniture, but buying 401ks or health insurance for their employees. So the strategy that we've outlined is to help them slowly make their way towards engaging with all of these suppliers, where there are tools like EcoVadis and other platforms that can do this in a quicker way that generally for-profit companies do utilize, but Earthjustice just doesn't really have the funding and the people power behind them right now on this team to make that a reality at this point.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.